Good morning and welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Joe Taylor. This morning, another in the ongoing series of programs presented by the Northwest Regional Key Program for Quality Early Learning. The program, through the Northwest Institute of Research, oversees a grant from the Office of Child Development and Early Learning at the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services and the Department of Education. The goal of the program is to improve the outcomes for young children as they prepare for school. John Posa from the Pennsylvania Key is the host of the program and is with us throughout the series. And John, we have someone on the line this morning, I guess, who's familiar with what we do, which is radio.
Yes, and finally have the opportunity to talk to her. Dr. Gail Saltz is our guest this morning, Joe. Dr. Saltz is best known for her work as a relationship, family, emotional well-being, and mental health and wellness contributor in the media, and she frequently shares her expertise and advice in print, online, on television, and radio. Dr. Saltz is also the best-selling author of numerous books and the go-to expert. After all, we are the expert show, Joe, on a variety of important psychological issues. So welcome to the program, Dr. Saltz.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so great to have you. And I know that you have addressed numerous topics in your field, but today we wanted to concentrate on, first of all, a term that we call, helicopter parenting. Now, I throw that phrase out there. There's probably a lot of our listeners that may not have heard that phrase before, but could you describe where this came from and what it's all about, helicopter parenting?
Sure. So, again, probably many of your listeners have heard that term. It's been in the mainstream media for a while now, but basically referring to parents whose style is to hover a great deal, be very, very involved in each and everything their child is doing, and often it means smoothing the way, as it were, doing things for their child or trying to, in some ways, make sure their child doesn't trip and fall, either literally or metaphorically, trying to be involved such that, for example, parents who, proceed along this path, often even into their child going to college, where they may try to get involved with a professor who, to ask about, delaying an assignment or why something went wrong, or things that really become, I think, easy to see why that might be a problem. But it often starts, at the beginning. And I think, many of these parents, of course, they love their child. It's well-intentioned. They want good things for their child. They may even be reacting to their parents' generation that was much more hands-off. There may be many things that go into feeling compelled to helicopter in that way.
Right. And I think some of the things, and of course our program works with parents and, discusses issues involving younger children. But I guess the thing that the takeaway from a lot of this is that for those who may be fearful that they may fit this category, the lessons that we need to learn is that sometimes, as you say in your writing, obstacles for children are actually a good thing for them to experience.
Obstacles, mistakes, failures. Basically, if you could hope for one thing for your child growing into an adult, it would be to build resilience. And, people do have varying amounts of resilience, but a good amount that they acquire is because of stumbling blocks or difficult things that have happened earlier in their lives that they've learned to develop coping tools around to manage whatever it is that happened, and then to incorporate that into who they are and the belief that they have the ability to manage difficulty. They have confidence about that. They have tools that they've acquired to do that. and they have experiences to look back on and say, oh, this thing that's happening to me now is really awful and difficult, but I remember the time this happened or this happened, and I managed it. And that's very important in terms of building resilience. If your first failure or difficult thing or loss or whatever it might be, challenge, is as an adult, it may be extremely difficult, much more difficult, and for some adults not surmountable because they don't have any of that equipment. They don't have that confidence or belief in themselves. Everything has been managed for them, and they're really, really at a loss. And so that is part of the reason it is so important to, frankly, not be too helicoptery.
I want to take the helicopter way back to almost the beginning, to just after birth. My daughter just gave me my first grandchild, a boy, and she and her husband are very calm and relaxed with him. Yet I know young parents who almost view their kid as a lab experiment, tracking every new sign of growth, every development against some chart, and losing sleep if the kid isn't, quite where he should be, or actually should be ahead of where he should be. Is this any way to raise and enjoy a kid?
Well, it's, again, I think that sometimes it's hard for parents to separate the child from themselves as an individual being, and understandably, most people's children are both an individual but also somewhat a narcissistic extension of the parent, right?
Right.
You're a piece of me. You came from me. You feel like me and a part of me. And unfortunately, I think many parents who don't recognize that aspect may take on parenting as sort of a competitive sport, and feel that this is so important, and if it's so important, then they have to get an A. And if they have to get an A, then their child has to perform at an A level, and anything less makes them extremely anxious, as though they're losing the race or they're losing control, or they're not doing the best job and things will not turn out all right, and not recognizing that, in fact, the pressure to be the best 24/7 is, in fact, maybe stoking anxiety of a different sort in their child in a very significant way. But many parents do feel this feeling to some degree. I'm not saying the feeling is wrong. I think it's a very natural feeling and a normal feeling, but you have to be aware of the feeling and the times at which it may be getting away from you, and therefore you're acting on it, like, as you said, this is where people start getting tutors for their child at 3, and interventions, and spend a lot of time very fearful that something will go wrong, or that something is an indication that something is going wrong, and handle that by implementing all of these, little Mozart and little, you will be an Olympic swimmer. We will start now, and those sorts of things that don't actually leave time for probably one of the most vital things in terms of childhood, which is downtime in which to have free-form play that is unstructured, that is at the child's own pace and own interest, because that is where the development of imagination and creativity and self-direction come from.
I was going to ask you a question about Little League, and I'll ask it very quickly because I think I know the answer. When I played Little League, we won a game, we got ice cream. We lost a game, no ice cream. Now everybody gets ice cream. What can you learn?
The phenomenon of everybody gets a trophy.
Yep.
But when you were talking about that, I remember it was much more fun to just play a pickup game, and you made your own rules, and they weren't the rules of baseball. They were the rules of Joe and John and Jimmy.
Yeah.
And that was frowned upon, but we went and we did that. So we were we were engaging in different kind of thinking, which today seems to be being suppressed.
Yeah, I would say it's more that there's sort of no room for it, right? There are only so many hours in a day. And if everything is very programmed and structured, then the time to go off and make up your own game is lost. And there is a lot of value in going and making up your own game. And even, as you're pointing out, in breaking the rules of the traditional game to make up your own game, because to some degree, right, that's what innovation is, if you think about it. Those are the kernels of innovation, right? We looked at the structure and we said, hey, let's change this up. Let's break this rule. And that is what, children do, frankly, more naturally and can be lost in adulthood, but maintaining it and developing the wiring in the brain that does that, essentially, is extremely valuable for later life. The aspect of everybody gets a trophy is a problem. And part of the problem is it was implemented with the idea that years ago we recognized that kids who really lack self-esteem, do poorly in certain respects. Maybe they have more anxiety or more depression, or, they carry this burden of low self-esteem, and we understood that that's not a good thing. But the solution of therefore everybody will get a trophy for doing nothing, which I think was implemented as, well, if you get a trophy, you'll feel good about yourself and you'll have self-esteem, really has turned out to just not be true. Kids are intelligent, and there is an understanding that getting a trophy for losing or not doing something is not satisfying. It does not build self-esteem. It just takes away the meaning of trophy. And so what we've done is what you do in the process is basically grow kids who feel entitled to get the good thing without the hard work or without the accomplishment. And, of course, that means that some people will accomplish and some people will not. And that is the reality of the world. And if accomplishing turns out to mean something to you, is important to you, then you will work hard to do it. And there may be a reward at the end of that. But really the reward is you did it. And so by just diluting the whole, everybody gets the same thing, we have not changed the self-esteem level of kids. It doesn't mean something to get the trophy. It doesn't mean something to be told good job when you did no job because you just weren't trying, or you tried but it didn't work out this time. You didn't do well this time. It doesn't. If you take away the congratulations for really the great job and say congratulations all the time, then even when it is a great job and you say congratulations, it's not terribly meaningful.
Right.
So we did not add to self-esteem for kids in that way. We may have, to some degree, diminished for those who really did accomplish and, it wasn't noted in any different sort of way. I would say to parents that you do want to help them delineate. Not, oh, that stunk, you did a bad job, you stink at that. But, I appreciate or laud your hard work. That's one arena of accomplishment, working hard. And then there's a different arena of accomplishment, which is maybe in certain instances you succeeded. Good for you. Good for you. But mostly what you want to reflect on for children is making an effort, is developing something, is sticking to it, because persistence and grit and determination, those are important things that you do want to help your child develop. And if you tell them they're phenomenal at everything and it doesn't matter whether they tried or didn't try, right, that doesn't build any of that. You want to help them understand that things like working hard and waiting for something, i.e. delayed gratification, is important and valuable, and you laud them for that, because delayed gratification, these are the kinds of skills, right, that you want to help them build as they grow up.
Yeah, obviously good advice. We're talking with Dr. Gail Saltz, well-known psychologist, and I hate to actually bring this up, but I mean, what are some of the warning signs of the impact that the helicopter parenting could have, especially on younger children, when it is persistent on the part of the parent in terms of, what could happen to a child and the warning signs for that?
Well, I think when you know that your child isn't attempting to problem solve, something happens and they look at you like,
right.
What now? What do I do? When they're not trying to problem solve, when they seem to have a low tolerance for what I would call uncomfortable affect or, uncomfortable feeling states. So, something isn't going well and they have a very low frustration tolerance or they have a very low threshold for which they sort of come unglued or fall apart. Those are signs that you maybe have been stepping in so much that they don't have the experience of soothing themselves, of managing the feeling of, it doesn't mean it would go away, but it's sort of like in a baby, the equivalent would be you want your child to be able to learn when they're fussy how to soothe themselves, right? So maybe they
Right.
suck their thumb, or maybe they snuggle their blankie, or maybe they toss around for a bit and fuss a bit for a while until they find a way to get comfortable. But if instead of that, the minute they make a peep, you have them out of the crib and you're rocking them again, then you are always the soother and they haven't learned anything about soothing for themselves. And so, it's sort of the developmental next phase of whatever that is. They melt down every time anything is kind of going on, and they don't think about how to solve that, and they don't come up with ideas for themselves. So, they're the kid who probably comes and goes, "I'm bored. I'm sad. I don't like this." And you're the parent who goes, "Oh, well, you could do this, you could do this. Let me break out the kit. Let me break it," and as opposed to, you're bored. Okay, well, why don't you go outside and see what you can come up with,
Right.
Why don't you call your friend and see what games you guys could think up? Or that thing happened. That's hard. You want to be empathic. That's hard. I understand. I'm sorry that you feel that way. I will talk with you about it. But then you want to frankly ask them questions. What do they want to do? What do they think about it? What do they feel? What do they want to do to problem solve around it? Let them struggle with it a little.
Referring to your latest book, The Power of Different, Disorder, and Genius, why is it seems especially in the last 20 years, schools have been so quick to want to categorize and probably stigmatize students, especially boys, who are not conforming to what institutionally is defined as normal? What's going on?
Well, I think it's a sort of a double-edged sword, right? It is important, and it has been necessary to acknowledge that at some point, close to half of Americans will have a mental health issue or a learning disability. And we have for decades been sticking our head in the sand and not acknowledging that something is going on that perhaps needs treatment so that the person doesn't have to suffer as much. But at the same time, because there's been so much stigma around these issues, and that's part of the reason that we haven't acknowledged, or individuals don't acknowledge, or families don't acknowledge that something is going on, because they feel it's all going to be a shame-based situation for them. We have kept our educational systems and our work systems very narrowly focused on everybody should jump through the same hoop at the same height, which which is a very high height, to be considered a success. And that has done a tremendous disservice to these many, many, many children who, it turns out, and this is really what the book was about, really have not only a very particular strength associated with that mental health issue or learning disability, but a strength that is likely stronger, if you will, or more able than somebody who doesn't have that mental health issue or learning disability, because there is a hardwired connection. And so schools that say everybody must do everything this way are missing out on what can be added to the school, but moreover, the many, many children who are not getting to show what they know and develop their particular strengths because there's no attention to the way that they can show it, which might not be the same as somebody who doesn't have that issue going on.
Yeah, one of the people that you highlight in that book is Albert Einstein. And for folks who may not be aware, what was the issue with Albert Einstein?
Well, I do want to be clear to people listening, we can't actually diagnose somebody who's deceased and we haven't met.
Right, yeah, I'm sorry.
But there is a lot of information when you look at his past relationships, which had a tremendous amount of chaos involved in them. When you look at his school performance, which was unbelievably excellent in the areas that he was interested and passionate about, which were math and science. But actually, he was, in some regards, a very poor student in areas that did not interest him and had a great deal of difficulty paying attention, like in Greek, where apparently his teacher told him he would never amount to anything. And he was very cognizant of the importance of using fantasy and his imagination to come up with the ideas that ultimately he did come up with to change the world of science for us. The classic guy looking out the window and imagining riding on a light beam and sort of analyzing that and thinking of the ideas that ultimately led to the work that he did, but doing that as a student and how vital and important that was and how easily he did that, and that brought him creative, innovative ideas, and then his ability to hyper-focus on the science at hand when he was, for example, in the course of 2 weeks, writing 3 papers that would forever change the face of astrophysics and physics and our understanding of the universe, and Nobel Prize winning work. And so distractibility when you're not interested, hyper-focus when you are interested, use of daydreaming at a high level, chaotic impulsiveness in relationships, these are all features of what today we would call attention deficit disorder. And so, on the one hand, they created difficulties in his life, and on the other hand, they were probably very much part and parcel of what made him an incredible, iconic genius.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Boy, I'll tell you that the time is gone, Dr. Saltz. Wonderful discussion. I'm so happy that we were able to get you on the program. Great advice for parents. Appreciate you being on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's our program for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks at this same time. In the meantime, you can go online to learn more at papromiseforchildren.com. For John Posa and the Northwest Regional Key Program for Quality Early Learning, I'm Joe Taylor. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.